The elevator doors opened to the 63rd floor, and Olivia Lang stepped out into the marble lobby of Anderson Financial Group, her heart hammering against her ribs in a way that had nothing to do with the altitude. She had rehearsed what she would say 1,000 times during the cab ride over, practiced keeping her voice steady and professional, but now that she was actually here, every carefully planned word evaporated from her mind. She clutched her leather portfolio tighter, the one she had splurged on last month when the school district announced another round of budget cuts, and approached the reception desk, where a woman with perfectly coiffed hair looked up with a practiced smile. "I have an appointment with Mr. Anderson," Olivia said, pleased that her voice came out steadier than she felt. 3 o'clock. The receptionist tapped at her computer. "Miss Lang." "Yes, he's expecting you. I'll let his assistant know you're here. Please have a seat." Olivia settled into one of the pristine leather chairs, smoothing down her navy dress, and trying not to think about how much this single piece of furniture probably cost more than her monthly salary. She had been teaching high school English for 8 years now, and while she loved her job with a fierce passion that surprised even herself sometimes, the reality was that passion did not pay the bills. The charter school where she worked was struggling, facing possible closure at the end of the academic year unless they could secure additional funding. When the board had asked for volunteers to approach potential donors, Olivia had raised her hand before she could talk herself out of it. What she had not expected was to discover that one of the wealthiest men in the city had once sat in her very first classroom, Connor Anderson. Even now, the name sent a ripple of disbelief through her. She had looked him up after finding his name on the list of local philanthropists. And there he was, his face older and sharper but unmistakably the same boy who had sat in the back row of her English class 8 years ago during her very first year of teaching. He had been 18 then, a senior who showed flashes of brilliance between bouts of what she had mistaken for teenage apathy. She had been 24, fresh out of graduate school, and terrified she would fail at the one thing she had always dreamed of doing. "Miss Lang." She looked up to find a young man in an expensive suit gesturing toward the hallway. "Mr. Anderson will see you now." Her heels clicked against the polished floor as she followed him down a corridor lined with abstract art that probably cost more than her car. The assistant opened a heavy wooden door, and Olivia stepped into an office that was all floor-to-ceiling windows and understated luxury. Behind a massive desk sat a man who made her breath catch in her throat, not because she was nervous about asking for money, but because Connor Anderson at 26 was nothing like the boy she remembered. He stood as she entered, and she was struck by how tall he was, how the expensive charcoal suit fit his broad shoulders perfectly, how his dark hair was styled with effortless precision. But it was his eyes that held her, the same intelligent green eyes that had watched her stumble through that first year of teaching, though now they held something deeper, something that spoke of experience and success, and a confidence that came from building an empire before most people finished their first entry-level job. "Miss Lang," he said, and his voice was warm, tinged with something she could not quite identify. "I was hoping it was you when I saw the appointment." "Connor," she said, then caught herself. "Mr. Anderson, thank you for seeing me. Connor is fine." He came around the desk, and she noticed he moved with a fluid grace that seemed at odds with the power he wielded. "Please sit. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "I'm fine, thank you." She settled into the chair across from his desk, hyper-aware of how he watched her, his gaze intent in a way that made her skin warm. "I appreciate you taking the time. I know you must be incredibly busy. Never too busy for my favorite teacher." He leaned against the edge of his desk rather than returning to his chair, and the casual intimacy of the gesture threw her off balance. "I have to admit, when I saw your name on my calendar, I spent the rest of the morning remembering sophomore year English." "You were a senior," she corrected automatically, then felt her cheeks flush. "Sorry, teacher habit. Some things never change." His mouth curved into a smile that was nothing like the half-hearted expressions she remembered from his teenage years. This smile was confident, genuine, and devastatingly attractive. "You were always correcting us, but you made it feel like you actually cared whether we learned anything. Most teachers had already given up on half the class. You never did." The compliment settled over her like a warm blanket, but she forced herself to focus on why she was there. "That's actually part of why I wanted to speak with you. The school where I work now, Riverside Charter, is facing closure. We serve a lot of students who fall through the cracks at traditional schools, kids who need someone who will not give up on them. But we need funding to stay open past June." Connor's expression shifted, became more serious. "Tell me about it." For the next 20 minutes, Olivia laid out the situation. She showed him the statistics, the success stories, the budget shortfalls. She talked about students like Marcus, who had been expelled from 2 schools before finding his place in her creative writing class, and Jasmine, who had raised her reading level by 4 grades in a single year. She spoke with the passion that made her good at her job, and she watched Connor's face as she talked, saw the way he leaned forward, fully engaged, asking questions that showed he was not just being polite. "How much do you need?" he asked when she finished. She told him the number, her stomach twisting. It was not a fortune to someone like him, but it was more than she had ever asked anyone for in her life. Connor was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming against the desk in a gesture she recognized from years ago when he was working through a problem. Then he nodded. "I'll fund it. The full amount." Olivia stared at him. "Just like that, just like that." He stood, crossed to his desk, and pulled out a business card. "Have your board contact my assistant. We'll set up the transfer by the end of the week." Relief flooded through her so powerfully she thought she might cry. "Connor, I do not know what to say, thank you. You're saving so many kids who need this chance." "I'm not done." He came back around the desk, and now he was standing close enough that she caught the faint scent of his cologne, something expensive and subtly masculine. "I want to be involved. I'd like to visit the school, meet the students, maybe even speak to some classes, and I want to take you to dinner to discuss it." "I can arrange a tour," she said quickly. "We'd love to have you visit." "That's not what I meant." His voice dropped slightly, became more intimate. "I want to take you to dinner, Olivia, not as a donor and a teacher, as 2 people who knew each other a long time ago and might want to know each other now." Her heart stuttered. "I do not think that's appropriate." "Why not?" He tilted his head, studying her. "You're not my teacher anymore. I'm not your student. We're both adults. You're 26, she pointed out, grasping for reasons that felt flimsy even as she spoke them. And you're 32, 6 years. That's hardly scandalous. He moved a fraction closer, and she could feel the heat radiating from him. "Unless you're involved with someone." "No, but that is not the point." "Then what is the point?" His voice was gentle now, coaxing. "I've thought about you over the years, wondered how you were doing, whether you were still teaching. When I saw your name on my calendar, I canceled 2 meetings just to make sure I'd be available. I'm not asking you to marry me, Olivia. I'm asking you to have dinner with me. Let me thank you properly for being the one teacher who actually gave a damn whether I succeeded." She should say no. Every professional instinct she had screamed that this was a line she should not cross, that there were too many complications, that he was now a major donor to her school and mixing personal and professional was a recipe for disaster. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw something that made all her careful reasoning scatter like leaves in the wind. She saw genuine interest, attraction, and something else, something that looked almost like hope. One dinner, she heard herself say, to discuss the school. His smile was worth every misgiving. To discuss the school. Friday night. I'll pick you up at 7. She gave him her address, gathered her portfolio, and somehow made it back to the elevator on legs that felt unsteady. It was not until she was back on the street, the cool spring air hitting her flushed face, that she allowed herself to acknowledge what had just happened. She had secured funding for her school, which should have been the most important thing. But all she could think about was the way Connor had looked at her, like she was someone worth canceling meetings for, worth pursuing, worth knowing beyond the walls of a classroom where she had once held all the power. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Sarah. "How did it go?" "He said yes," Olivia typed back. "Full funding." "That's amazing. Celebration drinks tonight." Olivia hesitated, then added, "He also asked me to dinner." Her phone rang immediately. "What? Who asked you to dinner? The millionaire, your former student?" "Yes," Olivia admitted, stepping into a coffee shop to escape the noise of the street. "I know it's complicated. Complicated. Liv, it's like something out of a movie. Please tell me you said yes." "I said yes, but I should not have. He's a donor now. It's unprofessional." "He's also not your student anymore and apparently very interested in you. When was the last time you went on a date?" Olivia winced. "That's not the point." "It's exactly the point. You spend all your time working, taking care of everyone else. For once, let someone take care of you. And if he happens to be gorgeous and rich, well, that's just a bonus." After they hung up, Olivia sat with her coffee, watching people pass by the window. Sarah was not wrong. She had not dated seriously in over 2 years, not since her last relationship had ended with her ex telling her she cared more about her students than about him. She had been hurt, but she had also known he was right. Her job was not just a career, it was a calling, and she needed someone who understood that, who valued it rather than resenting it. The week passed in a blur of meetings with the school board, who were ecstatic about the funding and preparations for Friday night, which she tried not to think about too much. She told herself it was just dinner, just a professional meeting with a donor, but she also found herself buying a new dress, a deep green silk that made her eyes look darker and her auburn hair richer. She told herself it was because she wanted to look professional, but she knew she was lying. Friday evening arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind of perfect spring night that felt like a gift. Olivia had just finished applying the last touch of makeup when her doorbell rang at precisely 7 o'clock. She took a breath, checked her reflection one more time, and opened the door. Connor stood in her hallway, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. He wore dark jeans and a white button-down with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, somehow managing to look both casual and impossibly elegant. His eyes traveled over her, slow and appreciative, and when they met hers again, the heat in them made her pulse quicken. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself," he laughed, a real laugh that transformed his face. "I had a good feeling about tonight, so I left the tie at home. I hope that's okay." "More than okay." She grabbed her purse, locked her door, and followed him down to where a sleek black car waited at the curb. Not a limousine with a driver, she noted, but a sports car that he opened the door for before sliding behind the wheel himself. "I thought we'd go to Marco's," he said as they pulled into traffic. "It's Italian, quiet, and they have the best wine selection in the city." "Unless you'd prefer something else." "Marco's sounds perfect." She had heard of it, of course. It was the kind of restaurant where reservations had to be made months in advance. "How did you manage to get a table on such short notice?" "I know the owner." He glanced over at her, his expression playful. "One of the few perks of having more money than sense." "I doubt you have more money than sense. You built your company from nothing, didn't you? I read about you after I found your name on the donor list." "Did you?" There was something pleased in his voice. "What else did you learn?" "That you started Anderson Financial right out of college with a small inheritance and turned it into one of the most successful investment firms in the region within 5 years. That you're known for taking calculated risks that somehow always pay off. That you donate generously to education causes." She paused. "I also learned that you're considered one of the city's most eligible bachelors, though I'm not sure how reliable that particular source was." "Society page." He grinned. "My mother loves those articles. I find them mortifying." "Why? You should be proud of what you've accomplished." "I am proud of the business. The rest of it, the attention, the social obligations, it gets exhausting. Sometimes I miss being the kid in the back row who nobody paid much attention to." Olivia turned to look at him fully. "I paid attention to you, I know." His voice went quiet. "That's why I remembered you." The restaurant was everything he had promised, tucked into a converted brownstone with warm lighting and secluded tables. The owner, a jovial man named Marco, greeted Connor like family and showed them to a corner table that felt private despite the other diners. Olivia let Connor order the wine, a red that the sommelier brought out with reverent care, and then they were alone, menus in front of them, the weight of possibility hanging in the air between them. "Tell me what you've been doing for the last 8 years, Connor said after they had ordered. "Besides teaching and saving schools. That's most of it, honestly." She took a sip of wine, letting the rich flavor settle on her tongue. "I taught at that public school where you were my student for 3 years, then moved to Riverside when they opened. I love it there. The kids are challenging, but they're also incredible when you give them a chance. You always saw potential in people. I remember when you made us read The Great Gatsby and everyone groaned, but then you started talking about the American dream and what it meant to want something so badly you'd destroy yourself for it. You made it real. You made us care. You wrote an excellent essay on it," she remembered. "You argued that Gatsby's tragedy was not that he could not achieve his dream, but that the dream itself was fundamentally empty. It was one of the most insightful papers I read that year." Connor looked surprised. "You remember that?" "I remember all my students, but yes, I particularly remember yours. You had this way of seeing through to the heart of things, but you always acted like you did not care. I spent half that year trying to figure out if you were bored or brilliant." "Both," he admitted. "School felt pointless most of the time. I knew I wanted to do something in finance, and sitting through classes about things I could learn faster on my own felt like a waste. But your class was different. You challenged us to think, not just memorize." "What made you go into investment management?" she asked. "Why not banking or another field?" "I like the strategy of it, the research. Finding companies that are undervalued or overlooked and seeing their potential before anyone else does. It's like what you do with students in a way. You see the potential in kids everyone else has written off." The comparison warmed her more than the wine. They talked through dinner, the conversation flowing easily from topic to topic. He told her about building his company, the long nights and near failures, the moment when he landed his first major client and realized he might actually succeed. She told him about her students, the small victories that kept her going, the frustration of working in a system that seemed designed to fail the kids who needed it most. "Why teaching?" he asked over dessert, a tiramisu they were sharing. "You're clearly brilliant. You could have done anything." "Teaching is doing something." She set down her fork, meeting his eyes. "Every year I get to show up and maybe make a difference in someone's life. Maybe I'll be the teacher who believes in a student when nobody else does. Maybe I'll introduce someone to a book that changes how they see the world. That matters to me more than a bigger paycheck or a fancier title, even when it means struggling to pay your bills." His voice was gentle, not judging. "I saw your building when I picked you up. You deserve better than that. I have what I need." She felt defensive for a moment, then softened. "I know it probably seems crazy to you, choosing a job that barely pays enough to live on when I could make more doing something else. But I've never wanted anything else. This is who I am. I think it's incredible." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. "I think you're incredible. You were 8 years ago and you are now." Her breath caught at the touch, at the sincerity in his voice. "Connor, I need to be honest. I do not know what I am doing here. When you were my student, I never thought of you as anything but a kid I was trying to help. But now, sitting here with you, I cannot stop thinking about how different you are, how different this is. Is that a bad thing?" His thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand, and the simple touch sent shivers up her arm. "I do not know. It feels like it should be, like there should be a rule against this, but I cannot find one that matters. Then maybe we stop overthinking it." He stood, still holding her hand, and helped her to her feet. "It's a beautiful night. Walk with me." They left the restaurant and wandered through the neighborhood, the streets quiet and lit by old-fashioned lampposts. Connor kept her hand in his, the contact feeling both natural and thrilling. They talked about lighter things now, favorite movies and childhood memories, the kinds of details that filled in the gaps between who they had been and who they were now. "I have to confess something," Connor said as they paused at a small park, the city lights glittering beyond the trees. "When I was your student, I might have had a bit of a crush on you." Olivia felt her eyes widen. "You did not." "I absolutely did. You were young and pretty and passionate about books. Every guy in that class was at least a little in love with you, whether they admitted it or not. I had no idea." She felt her face heating. "I was so focused on not failing at my first teaching job that I never noticed. That's part of why we liked you. You treated us like we mattered, not like we were there to boost your ego." He turned to face her fully, his hands coming to rest on her waist. "I'm not that kid anymore, Olivia, and this is not a crush. I'd like to see where this goes if you'll let me." She should say no. She should tell him it was too complicated, that she needed to maintain a professional relationship with him as a donor, that the age difference still felt strange even if it was not technically problematic. But standing there with his hands on her waist, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her forget every reason to be cautious, she found she did not want to say no. "I'd like that," she whispered. He kissed her then, soft and searching, and she felt something in her chest crack open, something she had kept carefully locked away for too long. His lips were warm, his touch gentle but sure, and when he pulled back she was breathless. "I've wanted to do that all night," he admitted. "I'm glad you did." She let him pull her closer, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. "This is crazy." The best things usually are. They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other in the soft spring night before Connor drove her home. He walked her to her door, kissed her again with a tenderness that made her ache, and promised to call her tomorrow. Olivia let herself into her apartment and leaned against the door, touching her lips and trying to process what had just happened. She had gone to ask for funding, and somehow ended up falling for the man who used to sit in the back row of her classroom. It was improbable and complicated and probably a terrible idea, but it was also the most alive she had felt in years. The next few weeks were a blur of stolen moments and long conversations. Connor did visit the school, and watching him interact with her students was a revelation. He was patient and genuine, listening to their stories and asking questions that showed real interest. He set up a mentorship program, bringing in professionals from his company to work with students interested in business and finance. The kids adored him, and Olivia found herself falling harder with each passing day. They kept their relationship quiet at first, not hiding it exactly but not advertising it either. Connor took her to dinners in quiet restaurants, to a jazz club where they danced until midnight, to a bookstore where he insisted on buying her every novel she so much as glanced at. He was attentive and thoughtful, remembering details from their conversations, and surprising her with small gestures that showed he was paying attention. But it was the quiet moments that undid her. The evenings when he showed up at her apartment with takeout, and they ate on her couch while she graded papers, and he worked on his laptop. The mornings when he called just to hear her voice before a difficult day. The way he listened when she talked about a student who was struggling, really listened, and then helped her brainstorm solutions. "I never expected this," she admitted one night as they sat on her balcony, small as it was, watching the city lights. "When I went to your office, I was so focused on saving the school that I never imagined we'd end up here. I think I hoped we would." He pulled her closer, his arm around her shoulders. "From the moment I saw your name on my calendar, I was hoping you'd turn out to be someone I could fall for. I just did not expect it to happen so fast or feel so right. It does feel right." She turned to look at him, seeing the emotion in his eyes. "It also scares me. What if this changes things at the school? What if people think I asked you for money because of personal reasons? Did you?" "No. But that does not mean they will not assume it." Connor was quiet for a moment. "Then we'll be transparent. I'll make it clear to your board that my funding was based entirely on the merit of your program, which it was. And if anyone has a problem with us dating, they'll have to take it up with me." "That's easy for you to say. You're not the one who could lose credibility." "You're right." He shifted so he was facing her directly. "But I also know that anyone who works with you for 5 minutes will see how dedicated you are, how much you care about those kids. Your reputation speaks for itself, Olivia, and I'll do whatever I need to do to protect it, including stepping back if that's what you want." The offer touched her deeply, but she knew she did not want him to step back. She wanted him exactly where he was, close and constant and increasingly essential to her happiness. "I do not want you to step back. I just want to make sure we're doing this right. Then we'll be careful. We'll be professional at the school. But here, when it's just us, I want to be able to tell you that I'm falling in love with you." Her heart stopped. "Connor, I know it's fast. I know we're still figuring this out, but I'm not good at playing games or pretending I feel less than I do. I'm falling for you, Olivia." "Actually, I think I've already fallen." She kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it, all the hope and fear and overwhelming emotion. When they broke apart, she was crying, and he wiped her tears away with gentle thumbs. "I'm falling for you too," she whispered. "And it terrifies me and thrills me and feels like the best and scariest thing that has ever happened to me. Then we'll be terrified together." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips, "and we'll figure it out as we go." They told Sarah first, over brunch the following weekend. Her friend took one look at them, at the way Connor's hand rested on Olivia's lower back and how she leaned into him unconsciously, and she grinned. "Finally," Sarah said. "I was wondering when you two would make it official." "What do you mean, finally?" Olivia asked. "This is the first time you are meeting him. Liv, you've been glowing for weeks. I knew something was going on." She extended her hand to Connor. "I'm Sarah, the best friend. Hurt her, and I will destroy you, millions or no millions." Connor shook her hand solemnly. "I would expect nothing less." They told Olivia's family next. A nerve-wracking Sunday dinner where her parents and younger brother peppered Connor with questions. Her father, a retired construction worker, seemed skeptical of the age difference and the money. But Connor handled it with grace, talking about his upbringing in a middle-class family and how his success had been built on hard work and lucky breaks in equal measure. By the end of the evening, her mother was hugging him and her father was offering to show him his workshop. "That went well," Connor said as they drove back to her apartment. "My mother loved you. She's probably already planning the wedding. Would that be so bad?" He glanced at her, his expression carefully neutral, and Olivia's breath caught. "Connor, we have been dating for 6 weeks. I know. And I know it is too soon to talk about marriage, but I also know that I do not want anyone else. I know that when I think about my future, you are in it." "Is that crazy? Maybe." She reached over and took his hand. "But I feel the same way, so either we are both crazy or we are onto something real. I'm betting on real." The school year ended with a celebration. Riverside Charter would not only stay open, but expand, adding new programs and facilities funded by Connor's foundation. Olivia watched her students graduate, kids who had been on the verge of dropping out now heading to college or vocational programs, and she felt the deep satisfaction that came from knowing she had made a difference. Connor was there for the ceremony, sitting in the audience rather than on the stage despite being the guest of honor. Afterward, he found her in the chaos of students and parents, pulled her aside and kissed her soundly. "I'm so proud of you," he said. "Look at what you have built here." "We built it," she corrected. "None of this would have happened without your support. You give me too much credit. The funding helped, but you're the heart of this place. These kids love you because you never gave up on them." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch lingering. "Just like you never gave up on me. You didn't need me to not give up on you. You were always going to be successful. Maybe, but I would not be happy. You taught me that success is not just about money or status. It's about finding something that matters and pouring yourself into it. You do that every day, and it makes me want to be better." That summer was golden. Connor took time off work, something his assistant claimed was unprecedented, and they explored the city together. They went to concerts and museums, took a weekend trip to a beach town where they walked barefoot in the sand, and spent lazy mornings in bed talking about everything and nothing. Olivia met his family, his mother who welcomed her warmly, and his father who assessed her with shrewd eyes before declaring her perfect for his son. She learned that Connor's success had not come without sacrifice, that he carried guilt about how hard he worked, about whether he was doing enough good in the world. "You do so much good," she told him one night as they lay tangled together in his apartment, the city spread out below his floor-to-ceiling windows. "The programs you have funded, the businesses you've helped grow, the jobs you've created. You make a difference, Connor. It does not always feel like enough. Sometimes I look at what you do, how directly you impact people's lives, and I wonder if I should be doing something else. You should be doing what fulfills you. For me, that is teaching. For you, it is building and investing and creating opportunities. There is not one right way to make the world better." She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. "Besides, if you were not doing what you do, you would not have been able to save my school. Everything is connected." He pulled her down for a kiss that quickly deepened, and they lost themselves in each other, in the physical expression of feelings that had grown too large for words alone. As summer faded into fall, Olivia prepared for a new school year. Connor had become a constant presence at Riverside, not interfering but supporting, and the students had taken to calling him Mr. A nickname that made him grin every time. He and Olivia were careful to maintain professionalism at school, but everyone knew they were together, and the general consensus seemed to be approval mixed with amusement. Miss Lang and Mr. a sitting in a tree, one of her sophomores sang one day, and Olivia had laughed despite herself. "Focus on your essay, Marcus," she had said, but she was smiling. It was in October, on a crisp Saturday morning, that Connor took her back to the bookstore where they had spent one of their early dates. They wandered through the stacks, Olivia pulling books at random and reading him passages, Connor watching her with an expression that made her heart race. Finally, he led her to the poetry section and pulled down a worn volume. "Read this one," he said, handing her the book open to a specific page. She looked down at the poem, something about love and time and choosing to build a life with someone. When she looked up, Connor was on one knee, a ring box open in his hand. "I know we have not been together long," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "And I know some people will say we are rushing, that we should wait longer. But I have never been more sure of anything in my life than I am of this, of you, of us. You taught me what it means to care about something bigger than myself. You showed me that success without purpose is empty. And you made me believe that I could be the kind of man worthy of a woman like you. Olivia Lang, will you marry me?" She was crying and laughing simultaneously, the book tumbling from her hands as she dropped to her knees in front of him. "Yes," she said through tears. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, a simple platinum band with a single diamond that caught the light beautifully. And then they were kissing, oblivious to the applause from other shoppers who had gathered to watch. They married the following spring in a small ceremony surrounded by family and close friends. Olivia wore a simple white dress and carried wildflowers. Connor cried when he saw her walking down the aisle, and she cried during her vows when she promised to love him for all the days of her life. They honeymooned in Italy. 2 weeks of art and food and making love in sun-drenched hotel rooms, and returned home ready to build their life together. Connor moved into Olivia's apartment at first, claiming he liked the coziness of it, but eventually they bought a house together, a comfortable place with a big kitchen and a yard and enough space for both of them to work. Olivia kept teaching, and Connor kept building his company, but they made time for each other, for long dinners and weekend adventures and quiet evenings on the couch. A year after their wedding, Olivia discovered she was pregnant. They had talked about children, both wanting them but agreeing to wait until they felt ready. Apparently, ready had come sooner than expected. Connor was ecstatic, immediately buying every baby book he could find and insisting on going to every doctor's appointment. Olivia watched him fuss over her with amusement and love, marveling at how the confident CEO became nervous and overprotective when it came to her and their baby. Their daughter, Claire, was born on a snowy December morning, perfect and tiny and loved beyond measure. Connor held her with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face, and Olivia fell in love with him all over again watching him become a father. He was patient and gentle, getting up for midnight feedings without complaint, spending hours just watching Claire sleep in wonder. "I never knew I could love someone this much," he said one night as they stood over her crib. "I thought what I felt for you was the peak of it, but now there is this whole other dimension." "That is how it is supposed to work," Olivia said softly, leaning against him. "Love multiplies. It does not divide." They settled into the rhythm of parenthood, exhausted and happy. Olivia took a semester off, then returned to teaching part-time, while Connor adjusted his schedule to be home more. They hired a nanny to help during school hours, but they both wanted to be present for Claire as much as possible. 2 years later, their son Oliver was born, completing their family. He was a wild child from the start, always moving, always curious, the opposite of his calm sister. Connor joked that they each took after one parent, Claire with her thoughtful nature like Olivia, Oliver with his relentless energy like Connor. Olivia eventually became the principal of Riverside Charter, a promotion that allowed her to shape the entire school rather than just her classroom. Connor remained deeply involved with the school's funding and direction, and together, they built it into one of the most successful charter schools in the state. They brought in innovative programs, hired passionate teachers, and maintained the core belief that every student deserved someone who believed in them. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they returned to the bookstore where Connor had proposed. The kids were with Sarah for the evening, giving them a rare night alone. They wandered the same aisles, now familiar with age, and Connor pulled down the same poetry book. "You remember what you thought when I proposed?" he asked. "I thought I was the luckiest woman alive." She leaned into him, comfortable in a way that came from years of partnership. "I still think that. I am the lucky one. I got to be loved by someone who sees the best in people, who builds them up instead of tearing them down. You made me want to be better, to do more, to live with purpose." "You already were all those things, I just helped you see it. We helped each other." He kissed her temple, his arm secure around her waist. "And we will keep helping each other for the next 50 years. "At least 50, she agreed. They walked home through the city streets, hand in hand, talking about their children and their work and their plans for the future. Olivia thought about the scared 24-year-old teacher she had been, standing in front of her first class, terrified of failing. She thought about the 18-year-old boy in the back row who she had seen potential in, who she had pushed to do better. She never could have imagined then that he would become this, her partner, her love, the father of her children, the person who made her life complete. Connor had been right when he said some things were meant to be. She had helped shape him during that formative year, had believed in him when maybe others had not. But he had shaped her too, had shown her that love could be easy and hard and worth it all at once, had given her a family and a future she had not known she wanted until she found it. The years continued to unfold with their usual mix of joy and challenge. Claire grew into a thoughtful teenager with a passion for writing, often staying after school to work on the literary magazine Olivia had helped establish. Oliver channeled his energy into sports and debate, excelling at both with a competitive streak that Connor recognized from his younger self. They had family dinners every night when possible, a rule Olivia insisted on despite busy schedules, and weekend mornings often found them all piled into the big bed, the kids telling stories about school while Connor made ridiculous commentary that had everyone laughing. Riverside Charter expanded to include a high school, fulfilling a dream Olivia had held for years. Connor's foundation funded a state-of-the-art facility, and they worked together to design programs that would give students real-world skills alongside academic knowledge. They brought in mentors from various industries, established partnerships with local colleges, and watched with pride as their graduation rates soared. "Remember when you walked into my office, nervous and determined, asking for funding?" Connor said one evening as they reviewed blueprints for the new building. They were in his home office, papers spread across the desk, their reading glasses on. "I remember thinking you were intimidating." Olivia looked up from the plans. "This polished, successful man who used to be a kid in my class. I did not know what to expect. I was nervous too. I spent the whole morning before you arrived trying to figure out what to say, how to impress you without seeming like I was trying too hard." He reached across the desk and took her hand. "I wanted to fund the school, but mostly I wanted an excuse to see you again." "Well, you got both." She squeezed his fingers. "And somehow we built all of this, not just the school, but everything, our family, our life, our partnership." "Best investment I ever made," he said with a grin that still made her heart skip. When Claire turned 16, she came to them with a request. She wanted to write an essay about their story for a college application, about how their relationship had shaped her understanding of love and partnership. Olivia had been hesitant at first, worried about making their family too public, but Connor had encouraged it. "Let her tell our story," he had said. "It is a good one, and she will tell it with honesty and heart, just like her mother would." Claire's essay was beautiful, talking about growing up watching her parents balance demanding careers while always making time for each other and their children. She wrote about accompanying Olivia to school events and seeing how the students respected her, about visiting Connor's office and witnessing how his employees admired him. But mostly she wrote about the small moments. Her parents dancing in the kitchen while dinner cooked, the way they finished each other's sentences, how they faced challenges together rather than letting them drive wedges between them. "You two taught me that love is not about grand gestures or perfect moments," Claire read aloud to them from her draft. "It is about choosing each other every day, even when it is hard. It is about building something together that is bigger than either of you alone. It is about being each other's biggest champion while still maintaining your own identity and dreams." Olivia cried reading it, and Connor had to excuse himself for a moment to compose himself. Later, in the privacy of their bedroom, he held her close. "We did something right," he whispered. "Our kids are incredible." "They are," Olivia agreed. "And so much of that is because of you, because of how you love them and support them and show up for them every single day. We are a team. We always have been." Oliver decided to attend Connor's alma mater for business school, though he joked that he was really going to prove he could do it without his father's connections. Connor respected that, stepping back to let his son forge his own path while being available whenever Oliver needed advice. Claire chose a liberal arts college known for its writing program, and Olivia helped her pack with a mixture of pride and sadness at her baby growing up. The empty nest was an adjustment. The house felt too quiet without the kids' constant noise and activity. But it also gave Connor and Olivia time to reconnect as a couple, to remember who they were beyond being parents. They took a trip to Ireland, renting a cottage in the countryside and spending 2 weeks reading and hiking and making love like newlyweds. They started a tradition of Friday date nights, sometimes fancy dinners and sometimes just takeout and a movie at home, but always time set aside just for them. "You ever think about where we would be if you had not come to my office that day?" Connor asked one Friday as they walked through the botanical gardens, the spring flowers in full bloom around them. "I try not to. It is a sliding doors moment I would rather not contemplate." Olivia stopped to smell a rose, its scent sweet and heady. "I like to think we would have found each other eventually, somehow. Maybe. But I am glad it happened the way it did. I am glad you were brave enough to reach out to ask for help. I am glad I was in a position to give it, and I am really glad I was bold enough to ask you to dinner. I am glad I said yes." She turned to face him, cupping his face in her hands. "Even though I was terrified, even though it seemed complicated and potentially messy, best decision I ever made." He kissed her there among the roses, as thoroughly as he had on their wedding day, and Olivia thought about how lucky she was. Not just because she had married a man with money and success, though those things certainly made life easier, but because she had found someone who shared her values, who supported her dreams while pursuing his own, who loved her fiercely and faithfully through every season of their lives. Years passed with their usual swiftness. Claire became a published author, her first novel about a teacher who changes lives receiving critical acclaim. Oliver took over a division of Connor's company, bringing fresh ideas while respecting the foundation his father had built. Connor and Olivia became grandparents when Claire married a kind man who taught history, and they had a daughter of their own, a little girl with Olivia's red hair and Connor's green eyes. "We are really old now," Connor joked as they babysat their granddaughter Emma one evening. He was on the floor, letting the toddler climb over him like he was a jungle gym. "Speak for yourself. I am aging gracefully." Olivia watched them play, her heart full. "You are good with her, just like you were with ours. I had a good teacher." He managed to sit up, Emma giggling on his lap. "You showed me what it means to be present, to really engage. I was so worried when Claire was born that I would mess it up, that I would not know how to be a father. But you were patient with me while I learned. You did not need much teaching. You have always had a big heart, Connor. You just needed permission to show it." That night, after Claire had picked up Emma and they were alone again, Connor pulled Olivia onto the back porch. They sat on the swing he had installed years ago, rocking gently and watching fireflies dance in the darkness. "I have been thinking," he said quietly, "about slowing down with work, maybe retiring in the next few years." Olivia looked at him in surprise. "Really? You love what you do." "I do, but I love you more, and I love our life together. I want more time for travel, for hobbies, for just being together without always having work hanging over us." He met her eyes. "What would you think about that?" "I think it sounds wonderful." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I have been considering stepping back too, maybe moving to a consulting role with the school rather than being principal. We have trained a great team. They do not need me the same way anymore. Then let us do it. Let us take the next chapter and make it about us." They announced their plans at Christmas. Their family gathered around the tree. Claire and Oliver had expected it, had even encouraged it, telling their parents they had earned the right to slow down and enjoy life. They transitioned over the following year, Connor handing over daily operations to a trusted team while maintaining a board position. Olivia mentoring her successor while still teaching one class because she could not quite give that up entirely. Their retirement was not a withdrawal from life, but an expansion of it. They traveled extensively, visiting all the places they had always talked about but never had time for. They took cooking classes in Tuscany, hiked Machu Picchu, spent a month in Japan learning about gardens and tea ceremonies. They volunteered together at literacy programs, combining their skills to help adults learn to read. They became fixtures at Emma's school events, the cool grandparents who showed up for every play and recital. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party. Friends and family filled their backyard, people whose lives Connor and Olivia had touched over the decades. Former students, now adults with careers and families of their own, came to thank Olivia for believing in them. Business partners and employees spoke about Connor's integrity and vision. But the most touching moment came when Claire and Oliver stood up to toast their parents. "Growing up, we watched you two build something remarkable," Claire said, her voice thick with emotion. "Not just successful careers, though you both certainly achieved that, but a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine love. You taught us that marriage is work, but it should also be joy. That supporting each other's dreams makes both of you stronger, not weaker." Oliver continued, "Dad, you showed me that success means nothing if you are not sharing it with people you love. That being a good man is more important than being a powerful one. Mom, you taught me that making a difference does not require grand gestures, just consistent, genuine care for others. Together, you showed us what we should look for in our own partners, the standard we should hold ourselves and our relationships to." Olivia was sobbing by the end, and Connor was not far behind. They stood together, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived, and thanked everyone for sharing their journey. That night, Alone in their bedroom, they lay in the darkness and talked about everything and nothing, the way they had for 30 years. "You remember being my teacher?" Connor asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her arm. "Of course. You were brilliant and frustrating in equal measure. Do you remember what you said to me the last day of senior year? I was leaving and you pulled me aside." Olivia thought back, trying to recall a conversation from over 3 decades ago. "I told you that you had more potential than you realized, that I hoped you would find something you cared about and pour yourself into it. You said that you had seen a lot of students pass through your classroom, but that you would remember me, that you believed I was going to do something special." His voice went rough. "I carried that with me for years. When I was starting my company and failing more than succeeding when I wanted to give up, I remembered that someone I respected believed in me. It made all the difference." "You made all the difference," Olivia corrected softly. "I just recognized what was already there." "We made all the difference together." He pulled her closer. "I walked into your classroom a kid who did not see the point of trying. I walked out knowing that someone cared whether I succeeded. And then, years later, you walked into my office and gave me a reason to be successful that mattered. You taught me that wealth means nothing if you are not using it to make the world better. That achievement is hollow without purpose. You have been teaching me for over 30 years, Olivia, and I am still learning. And you have been showing me that taking risks can lead to extraordinary things. That letting someone in, even when it is scary, is worth it. That love does not follow timelines or conventional wisdom." She kissed him gently. "I went to ask you for funding and found the love of my life. If that is not magic, I do not know what is." They made love slowly, tenderly, with the practiced ease of decades together, but also with the passion that had never dimmed. Afterward, wrapped in each other, Olivia thought about the twisting path that had brought them here. If she had not taken that teaching job at that specific school, if Connor had not been in her class that year, if she had not been brave enough to seek him out for funding, if he had not been bold enough to ask her to dinner. So many small moments that could have gone differently, but they had not, and here they were, 3 decades and a lifetime of love later. As she drifted off to sleep, Connor's steady heartbeat beneath her ear, Olivia sent a silent thank you to whatever forces had conspired to bring them together. She had gone looking for a donor and found everything she had not known she needed. She had been his teacher, and then she had become his student, learning about love and partnership and building a life with someone. Most importantly, she had become his equal partner, his best friend, his greatest love, and he had become hers. The next morning, Olivia woke to find Connor already up, standing at the window watching the sun rise. She joined him, slipping under his arm that automatically came around her shoulders. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "How I almost missed this. If I had been in a meeting when you requested an appointment, if I had not recognized your name, if I had been too cowardly to risk asking you out." He looked down at her, his eyes full of everything they had built together. "I think about all the ways this almost didn't happen, and it makes me grateful for every single day I get with you. We found each other. That is what matters. Whether it was fate or luck or just perfect timing, we found each other, and we chose each other, and we kept choosing each other every day since." She stretched up to kiss him. "And I will keep choosing you, Connor Anderson, for every day we have left." "That is good," he said with the smile that still made her heart race after all these years, "because I have no intention of ever letting you go." They stood there as the sun rose higher, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Two people who had started as teacher and student, become donor and recipient, transformed into lovers and partners and parents and grandparents. They had built empires, raised children, changed lives, and through it all, They had loved each other with a ferocity and tenderness that never wavered. It was not the story anyone would have predicted when Olivia walked into that classroom on her first day of teaching, nervous and determined to make a difference. It was not what Connor had imagined when he slouched in the back row, a bored teenager who did not yet understand his own potential. But it was their story, written in shared glances and late-night conversations, in passionate arguments and gentle reconciliations, in the everyday magic of choosing to love someone even when it would be easier not to. And it was, without question, the greatest story either of them would ever be part of. Years later, when Emma was old enough to understand, she asked her grandmother about how she and Grandpa Connor fell in love. Olivia sat with her on that same porch swing, now weathered by time but still solid, and told her the truth. "I met your grandfather when he was a student and I was his teacher. Years later, I needed help, and I was brave enough to ask him for it. He was generous enough to give it. And then he was bold enough to ask me to dinner, and I was wise enough to say yes. Everything else grew from those moments of courage and generosity and willingness to take a chance on something that seemed impossible." "That is so romantic," Emma sighed. "It is," Olivia agreed. "But the real romance was not in how we met. It was in how we chose to love each other every single day after that. That is what makes a love story worth telling, sweetheart. Not the beginning, but the middle and the end, the daily choice to show up and be present and build something together." Emma thought about that, her young face serious. "I want a love like that someday." "You will find it," Olivia assured her, "and it might not look the way you expect. The best things rarely do. But when you find it, you will know, because it will feel like coming home and starting an adventure at the same time." Connor joined them then, bringing lemonade and cookies, and Emma launched into questions about his version of their story. Olivia watched them together, her husband and granddaughter, and felt the familiar swell of gratitude that had become her constant companion. She had been 24 years old and terrified when she started teaching, had no idea that the bored boy in the back row would someday become the center of her world. She could not have predicted the path her life would take, the challenges and triumphs, the way everything would come together in ways that felt both surprising and inevitable. But she would not change a single moment of it. Every struggle, every doubt, every leap of faith had led her here, to this porch with these people, to a life so full of love and meaning that sometimes it overwhelmed her. She had wanted to make a difference, to touch lives and help people see their potential. And she had, in ways both big and small, through teaching and through loving a man who had used his success to lift up others. Connor caught her eye over Emma's head and winked, and Olivia's heart did the same flip it had done on their first date, at their wedding, when their children were born, every single time he looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world, because she was, just as he was in hers. And that, Olivia thought as Emma's laughter rang out and Connor's hand found hers, was the real magic. Not that they had found each other against the odds, though that was remarkable, but that they had built this together, this life filled with purpose and passion and people they loved. They had taken the unexpected gift of a second chance and transformed it into something beautiful and lasting. Their story had started in a classroom, continued in a corporate office, and grown into something neither could have imagined. It was written in the school that bore Connor's foundation's name, in the students whose lives Olivia had touched, in their children and grandchildren who carried forward their values. It was a story about second chances and choosing courage, about believing in people's potential and building something meaningful together. But most of all, it was a love story. The kind that proved sometimes the best things come when you are brave enough to ask for help, generous enough to give it, and wise enough to recognize that the person in front of you might just be the one you have been waiting for all along, even if you met them when the timing was all wrong. They had been teacher and student, donor and recipient, partners and lovers and parents and grandparents. Through it all, they had been each other's greatest champion, fiercest supporter, and truest love. And they had proven, beyond any doubt, that sometimes millionaires reconnect with their former teachers and discover that the student had become the one worth building a lifetime with. That night, after Emma had gone home and the house was quiet again, Connor and Olivia sat in their bedroom, getting ready for sleep with the comfortable routine of decades together. "Happy?" Connor asked as they climbed into bed. "Blissfully," Olivia answered, curling into him. "You?" "More than I ever thought possible." He kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for saying yes to dinner all those years ago. Best risk I ever took. Thank you for asking. Best decision I ever made." She yawned, exhaustion creeping in. "I love you, Connor." "I love you too, Olivia." "Always have, always will." They drifted off to sleep wrapped in each other. Two people who had found their way through an unconventional path to the most conventional and beautiful thing in the world. A love that lasted, a partnership that enriched them both, a life built together that was greater than either could have created alone. Outside, the stars shone down on their house, on the city where they had built their empire and raised their family, on the school where students still learned and grew under the foundation they had established together. The world spun on, full of other stories and other loves, but none quite like theirs, because theirs was special. Not because it was perfect or without challenges, but because it was real, authentic, built on mutual respect and genuine affection, and the daily choice to keep loving each other even when it was hard. It was the kind of love that inspired novels and movies, but it was also the kind of love that existed in small moments, in knowing glances and gentle touches, in showing up for each other day after day, year after year. Olivia had walked into Connor's office looking for funding and walked out with the beginning of forever. Connor had answered the meeting request thinking about a former teacher and discovered the woman he would spend his life loving. Neither had expected it, neither had planned for it, but both had been brave enough to recognize it when it appeared and wise enough to hold on tight, and in the end, that was all that mattered. Not how they started or what obstacles they faced, but that they found each other and chose each other and built something beautiful together. They proved that love could grow in the most unexpected places, that connections made in youth could transform into something deeper in adulthood, that sometimes the best relationships are the ones that surprise you. Their love story was complete now, written in decades of partnership and devotion. It would continue for whatever years they had left, and then it would live on in their children and grandchildren, in the students whose lives Olivia had touched, in the businesses Connor had built, in the school that bore their combined legacy. But more than any of that, it would live on as proof that love, real love, is worth taking chances for, worth being brave for, worth building your entire life around. And as they slept, peaceful and content in each other's arms, the universe seemed to smile on them, two souls who had found their way home to each other and created something truly extraordinary in the process. Their story was not just about a millionaire reconnecting with his former teacher. It was about two people who saw potential in each other when no one else did, who believed in each other's dreams and helped make them real, who loved each other with a devotion that never dimmed even as the years passed and life threw its inevitable challenges their way. It was a story about courage and generosity, and taking chances on love even when logic said you should not. It was about building something together that was greater than the sum of its parts. It was about finding your person and holding on tight, about growing together rather than apart, about choosing love every single day even when it was not the easiest choice. Most of all, it was proof that sometimes, when you are lucky enough and brave enough and wise enough, you find the one. And when you do, you never let them go. Connor and Olivia had found each other against the odds, had built a life that exceeded their wildest dreams, had loved each other through every season and challenge. They had proven that the best love stories are not the ones that start perfectly, but the ones that endure, that grow stronger with time, that become the foundation on which everything else is built. And they had lived happily ever after, not because their life was perfect or without struggle, but because they faced everything together, with love and commitment, and the unwavering belief that they were stronger together than they ever could be apart. Their story, started in a classroom and continued through corporate offices and family homes and everywhere in between, was complete. And it was, without question, a story worth telling, a love worth celebrating, a life worth living. Together, always together, they had found their forever. And that was everything.